So chapter 5, critical obfuscation. This is well, you can read the cartoon for yourselves here. Actually, this somebody I know went on a trip with somebody, and this was pretty much exactly what happened. It's kind of amazing. Our cartoonist just, made this up, and it just happened to coincide. It was pretty cool. Hello, Shisha. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Aloha. Kakahaika. I don't know what that means, but sounds wild. I don't know. Maybe that's Hawaiian for knucklehead. I don't know. just what comes to mind. I don't know. I assume not, though. But who knows? Might be. It would be appropriate somehow. Brilliant, brilliant. All right. So misdirection would be our first subcategory here. And the quote is, one of the chief tricks of bullshit manipulator narcissists is their ploy of misdirection, diverting attention away from the harmful bullshit through use of tone, intonation, vibe, and other tactics. Hiding what they're doing is of the utmost importance to the bullshitter. They know they're engaging in bullshit, sustained, extensive, and deliberate deception. Should this become clear, obvious, and refutable, and should what they say be proven to be false, their entire elaborate charade, their phony edifice will come tumbling down, a constant fear. To guard against this calamity, they take great pains to never say anything definitive, unless they absolutely have to. Their tactic to avoid being called on their nonsense is to always have it be unclear. They never say what they're trying to convey directly, clearly, or unambiguously. That's too risky. They love using implication, innuendo, inference, intimation, suggestion, vibe, tone, and pushing a narrative, and pushing a particular energy. These are all mechanisms which can't be easily pinned down, and thus they can't be held to them. Should matters not go as planned, they can quickly switch and pretend like nothing happened, or claim it was all just a misunderstanding, and other such reversals of position. Their aim, to prevent being held responsible for anything they say or do. It's kind of a big point, in terms of just that underlying desire not to be responsible and just not to have anything fixed, and that flexibility for them to be able to bullshit and deceive as they like. It's pretty huge. There's a peculiar reversal of this as well, the absolute inverse, which comes not necessarily in bullshitters, but in a desire it's more from an ego point than a bullshit point, where the opposite is, where one is looking to be too definitive. That's also where you're looking now. So you from like an earnest good point, where you don't want to have things be vague. So you have this desire to be like clear and concise, and that can lead one to be overly definitive again, which is also problematic. So it's just an interesting little side point. Yet yes, in the BMNs, their motivation is to obfuscate so that they can hide what they do in their bad intent. But sometimes we can go the other direction and trying to be too honest and then we make this over effort to be definitive, and that can make us opinionated in a peculiar way. So just something to keep in mind, that there's in all things, not in all things I should say, because that's kind of an excessive statement too, but just to be cautious of excess and going from the one extreme and the avoidance of this to go to the other extreme again, which is not always ideal. So we see that kind of often in life, that when people kind of realize that they've been extreme in one thing, then they sort of jump to the other extreme. So just something to be cautious about. Foisted fog. That's kind of, I like this title. It's pretty cool. So hi, Jaya. Nice to see you here. Brilliant. Yes, exactly. Politicians. You see this obfuscation with politicians, that precisely that. They say something and it sounds grand and fantastic, but where are the specifics? Like, how exactly are you intending to do this? No, it doesn't exist. And then, you know, when you start pinning them down, they switch to something else. It just fascinates me. You know, what really, really fascinates me, and I see it, you know, lately with some of the politicians, how they have had such, like, especially before, you know, this last election, they had very clear opinions. And after the election, they went completely 180. It's like, man, do you think we're going to forget that you said this? You know, do we just say, oh, well, you know, we just excuse you for, and under what grounds do we just excuse you? It's just fascinating to me. I don't know. I don't get how they can completely flip flop and they get away with it. That's what I found so unbelievable, is that that yes, obfuscation you can sort of still understand. Okay, I can't pin you down and I can't hold you to it necessarily. But when they clearly say one thing and then just switch to the other without saying, hey, you know, I've completely switched my opinion and, you know, okay, you know, justifying it. No, and they just jump around all the time. It's like, and people still vote for them. I don't know. I don't get that. All right. So, thank you, man. Thank you. I don't know how to pronounce your name, by the way. It'd be kind of interesting to know. So, you know, I can't respond to you, say, you know, when I'm saying thank you there, I'm just, you know, saying thank you to nobody. So you were saying thanks for serving the community, appreciate your work. So I begin to know how to pronounce your name. All right. It is quite a feat uncovering a soul and seeing what lies beneath the facade. Sometimes the facade is all there is. And that quote's a very sad commentary on the state of affairs for some people. And that all they have is the bullshit and the facade. I don't know. To me, that's very sad, you know, and so unnecessary, because really, you know, I know so many. Hey Max, brilliant, awesome, awesome. And I know so many awesome people that are, by their own admission, just exceedingly simple people. And that's it. And they're beautiful and magical and wonderful, and I love them dearly. And so does everybody that knows them. And, well, and some of them even love themselves. Some of them kind of need to learn to love themselves a little bit more, and they know that also. But man alive, you know, just this covering of the facade, because they're so afraid of that simplicity, you know, that it's not going to be enough. It's all based on this bullshit idea that you've got to be special and you've got to be clever and you've got to be smart and you've got to be successful in that. No, you don't. You just have to be yourself, and that means being happy and being okay and being chill. So there you go, Stephanie. I hope you're here. Stephanie's just the most beautiful soul, magical person. Brilliant. See, Stephanie, you're one of those awesome people I was talking about. I wouldn't say you're exactly simple, but you can be complicated like all of us. But you're an awesome soul, Stephanie. You're just beautiful and magical. So, brilliant. I'm pleased to hear, Stephanie. All right. So we're talking here on obfuscation, Stephanie, this chapter, and foisted fog. So just how, you know, they obfuscate everything and they make it all unclear, the bullshitters. So bullshitters always need to have an escape route, some way to be able to deny or excuse or explain, justify, or otherwise reverse position. Thus, obfuscation is a vital part of their strategy. Nothing is ever clear and upfront. Their energy is focused consciousness. Sorry, their enemy is focused consciousness and awareness, which that's really sad, you know. That's the thing for me, that you know, people that get caught up in bullshit, it's just the most sad thing. Because look here, they're pushing this facade because they're afraid of what they perceive to be very little inside or nothing at all. Which, man, you know, we all start with nothing and it doesn't matter, you know, just be nothing. So what? You know, they just have this idea it's not okay. But the problem is that they become, their enemy becomes focused consciousness and awareness, which means that their ability to grow, you know, and growing and learning, and that's kind of like what all life is about, as far as I'm concerned anyway. And if we kind of think it through, it seems pretty obvious, you know. And if you think learning and growing just from a survival point of view is useful, it's, you know, and learning and growing and adapting your awareness just from the ability to be more happy, that's powerful and useful. So they basically cut them off from all these avenues of growth and learning and change and becoming happier and becoming more fulfilled and making peace with themselves and all of the stuff. All of that needs consciousness and awareness, and they cut themselves all of that. Why? Because of this prime root misbelief of theirs. While they have a bunch of them, the belief in hierarchy, and the belief in being special, and the belief that you can't be kind of nothing, and just to be simple, and all this nonsense beliefs. So they mess their whole lives up. All their intelligence goes to serving those misbeliefs. And this is a profound point. Really, for me, it's a huge deal when we realize that our intelligence and even our emotions, they serve our beliefs, and then we feel according to our beliefs. We think according to our beliefs. We do according to our beliefs. And you can see people that to be really smart doing the most idiotic and preposterous and ridiculous things. Why? Because of misbeliefs. And you see good people suffer, again, also from misbeliefs. So, it's just, man, we have to really watch our beliefs. Very powerful. All right. If someone is alerted to what's happening, their game can't work. It relies on a subconscious inadvertent acceptance and going along with the subtle pressures and suggestions they constantly put out. They rely on the innuendos and implications simply being taken in by default and thereby acquiesced to and agreed to without the other even fully realizing what's transpiring. Or if they do, it's just a vague feeling that's usually too troublesome to deal with consciously. This is powerful. This where they, through that obfuscation, and they make it so unclear, they generate an implied agreement. And they will use that later on. Oh, but you didn't object when I was saying this, that, and that. And it's like, yeah, but you weren't really clear. It's like, what the hell? I didn't really. But then you get caught into this whole trap of stuff, and so. This obfuscation is very important when somebody's being all muddled like that, and you see it's not because they are genuinely trying to understand something, but they're saying what, when you think about it, it kind of sounds okay, but when you kind of think it through, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. That's the point, is to really actually listen to what people are saying, not just to hear it and hear the mood of what they say, because that's what bullshitters use. They kind of project a tone and a mood and a vibe, and you're not really listening to the exact words, but it sounds fantastic. I've heard some people on the internet, you see videos sometimes. Now, okay, I'm not watching bullshit videos, but, I've sometimes seen videos, or people have sent me links to videos. Oh, you got to watch this. This is like really like, and it's somebody that they like, a guru or somebody, whatever. Now, some of them, of course, not all. This is just the exceptions. All right. So, but sometimes what they say, they have the ability to make what they're saying sound really profound and very spiritual. And they have this vibe going. But when you actually listen to the exact words and you start kind of, especially if you see a transcript of it, you go through the precise words, you say, what exactly are you saying? It's like, wow, then you see there's actually nothing there. But they just project this fantastic vibe, like, man, the stuff is special, the stuff is important, the stuff is profound, the stuff is, spiritual, but they don't actually say anything. It's fascinating to me. And people come away, wow, this was really spiritual and profound. And then you ask, well, what exactly? And it's just amazing. So we have to really be careful about a mood implying something and then us believing that it was so. We need to really look at the actual details to see. Because, hey, at the end of the day, you come away from that video and you feel, wow, I connected to something spiritual. But what are you actually using from it in a specific, detailed, deliberate way? In other words, where's the application? Without the application, it's all meaningless. Yes, it makes you feel good that you connected to something spiritual, and that has its own value. Make no mistake, sometimes all we need is just to be reconnected to our spirituality. So, things like that do serve a purpose. So I'm not necessarily knocking it entirely. Sometimes we can just go for a mood change, and that's all we need. And okay, thank you. That's all I needed. But I'm trying to make the point here that when it comes to just the world at large, looking at things with just that little bit of extra attention, to be discerning, in other words, it's massively, important and useful, so that we don't just kind of believe stuff without knowing what it is that we believe. We just don't believe by implication. Obfuscation is their great ally, as it allows them the confusion and unclarity from which to protest or correct matters should their bullshit be called or exposed. And that's the very big key for them here, that gives them that out. They can then mount a defense from within their undefined communication. Since nothing was clear, it all boils down to interpretation and subjective perception, or so they like to believe. They love vagueness because they think no one could conclusively prove what they do. Of course, anyone who realizes what they're about doesn't need to prove anything. If they're sensible, they will just avoid future interactions. Ironically, the BMNs don't realize others obfuscate them when it comes to interacting. So yeah, most sensible people when it comes to, I just saw your haha there. So most sensible people, when it comes to people like that, they just kind of avoid them and move on because, what's the point? So they just sort of leave them, and the BMNs or the bullshitters, they get obfuscated in turn. It's like, okay, you want to connect as a bullshitter. What do you do when they say, hey, you kind of, well, I've got this, you don't want to directly say, look, I don't want to go out, whatever, you obfuscate in turn. Okay, maybe that's bullshitty too. But you're looking to be polite and not hurt their feelings, or in some cases not cause enmity, because with the bullshitters, if you like directly tell them, hey, look, sorry, you're just a bullshitter, man, I don't want to interact with you, then they become nasty and they become negative, and then they start spreading bullshit lies and rumors and shit around you. So it requires some finesse to kind of phase them out of your life and minimize them. So difficult to deal with them sometimes. All right, fake friendships. This is very powerful. And I see this particularly in dating. Yeah, so there's something to really pay attention to. The bullshit manipulators push self-promotion to gain justification of self, attention, and compliant followers, fans, and audience, groupies, sycophants, etc. They need a constant new supply of hosts to prey off. Bullshit manipulator narcissists are parasites. This is a powerful point, man. Man, it's like a big deal that we don't really realize how these people, they kind of feed off that energy that they so crave, the energy of admiration, the energy of people thinking they're special and all of this stuff. And, the problem with parasites is that you're dependent on the host, and they don't realize this. They really don't realize that. To be a parasite, you aren't free. It's a very limited way of, exactly, Shisha. The absolute ideal, and we get to it later in the book, is best not to engage them at all. We get when we talk about black hole psychologies, which is kind of what they are. There's no way you can fix a black hole. Any energy you give it, it just makes the black hole bigger because it feeds off energy. So I don't care how much you love that black hole, all you're doing is making it a bigger black hole, right? So the only way, if you truly, truly want to love a black hole, is just leave it be. Right? Don't send it any negativity because that's also energy. You can just leave it be. Absolutely no interaction, no engagement, right? Then you're not feeding it at all. Obfuscation is used in many ways. Friendships are one such disguise. True and real friendships aren't possible for the BMN. For one, the lack of honesty and integrity precludes such an eventuality. Then there's the matter of equality. Even a more or less equality. This too cannot be. The BMN always has to be top dog. Besides, they don't actually want real friendships, since they want matters all in their favor. This is always their aim. They want followers, groupies, admirers, and those they can dominate. They obfuscate these agendas under the guise of friendship, and this is a sad state of reality. Hi Bina, I don't know if you I think it seems it is not telling me who joined, so if you did join, make a comment there so I can see. But I just saw a little notification that came up. So yeah, and this is a sad thing, how they abuse this thing of friendship. It's like, man, you give friendship a bad name in many ways, and that's really sad to me. It's just a pity, because they go about being all friendly and all that. I will see. We'll read a little bit here now. Just while I'm about it here, I'm spotting things that need editing. So that's not. It's my Mr. A. You see, Mr. A saying, "Hey, you know what? You see, they weren't matching. They're still not matching." Oh, now I made a whole mess here now. Matching now. Not really. That's interesting. That's interesting. Anyway, they will make friends with the lost and the lonely, with the desperate, and always with those whom they deem to be less than them, and try with all their being to suck up and cozy favor and somehow get in with those they see as superior or better than. One but needs to watch Animal Planet to observe this mentality and psychology clearly on display in most animal species which aren't solitary. The BMN is mindful, however, to obfuscate their agendas using friendship as a cover. Who are our friends and why? Asking and checking is valuable, often leading to change. Knowing our friends, knowing why we're friends with them and why they're with us matters. Bringing light to our own relationships makes all the difference. Unawareness when it comes to our friends and friendships is how we get into trouble. And I want to say something here, especially again when it comes to, hey, hello, Bina. When it comes to this and dating, I see this all the time. It's that, man, don't ever be bloody desperate. Please, 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 please don't be desperate, especially when they fly. Especially when it comes to dating, and making friends. Don't be desperate. That's where you get taken advantage of. That's where you settle for second and third and 10th and 100th best. When you settle for rubbish and you settle for bad stuff because you're desperate. And that's no good, man. You get yourself into trouble. So please don't ever be desperate, just not in anything, especially when it comes to friends and dating. It's just like, man, it's the worst thing. It's a disease of futility. Desperation. Desperation is a disease of futility. Doesn't work. Bullshit manipulators work the technicalities and the gray areas, promising one thing, yet having the agenda for something that's personal and entirely different. This is ethically fraudulent. The fraud of intent is the bullshit. They promote themselves, seldom the activity or surface objective. So since I'm on that point of dating, this is a big point that comes through, our bigger program, The Way of Impeccability. The ability, or developing the ability, just shifting. We actually all have this ability already, but all we need to do really with most people, when you encounter them or your interactions, just ask this question in this particular way. What is the intent here? And a very specific way of asking that. Yes, Max, we learn a lot and experience a lot via dating. It's very profound. So in dating, right? So take a date that you've been on, a first date, and picture that in your mind when you first came and you met the person. And okay, let's say you were in a restaurant and you sat down at the table, and you're in that stage where things are getting going. At that point where you first meeting, right? Picture that first vision of the first meet. And now, really immerse in that. You're right in there, you're seeing the person, that first impression that you have, and they start speaking and doing. Ask the question, what is the intent here? Now, it's a very particular way to ask it. Not what their intent, what is the intent? Yes, you do want to kind of click to what their intent is, but you also want to ask what's the intent in the overall, because now you're connecting to a greater logic. And it's kind of a more spiritual question, but nonetheless, I just want to focus on that question of that the one part of it that's going to reveal their intent. We can get to the greater intent another time. But when you actually ask the question, what's the intent here? You see their intent, and you might also see your own. You might see universal intent. Okay, there's a lot that comes into that question. But when we perceive somebody's intent, we say, when it comes to a bullshitter, pretty much always we can see, the intent is self-promotion. Their intent is to look clever. Their intent is to seem friendly. Oh, seem friendly. We really can. We have the skill of perceiving intent. Hey, hi, Mary. Because, that's how we survived out in the jungle. You see the intent of the lion that it wants to eat you. And sometimes you see, well, the lion is chill. Okay, maybe lying right next to the waterhole. I can go fairly close to him. Why? Because he doesn't have the intent right now to hunt. He's just lazy. He's lying there. We can perceive intent. That's how we read the situation. We can see if somebody's aggressive or non-aggressive, or what their intent is. We have the skill. It's a very profound skill. We just need to activate it consciously. Thank you. With the desperation. Yeah. It's very powerful, because that's the thing with desperation. When we are desperate, we override that intent. And desperation, what it does, it narrows your awareness and your focus, and you ignore all sorts of things. So when you go through people on first dates, now I do this, it's a very powerful exercise. Maybe do it with your own or with somebody else who's just had a disastrous first date, right? Or maybe it led to second and third and fourth dates and it was all a big screw up. But then go through it like you're watching it in a movie on a CD or a video or whatever, and you can stop and rewind and pause, and you go through that date, frame by frame. Okay, what did they say? And then you have them describe it and watch their reactions, and you will see inevitably when they go through it in a precise, detailed explanation or description of what's going on, they'll say you kind of see them maybe squirm a little bit and be awkward. It's like, and you say, were you comfortable with when they said that? Well, no. Now that you mention it, no, not actually. Wasn't that kind of a red flag? Ah, shit, yeah, oh, yeah. And then you see how there were all of these warning signs that they, at the time, they actually did know them, but not consciously. They weren't in deliberate awareness, or they just suppressed them, say, yeah, that kind of bothered me when they said that, and that was very disturbing, but, I just, and then they make some excuse. They kind of say, well, I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. I didn't want to be rude or whatever. But because they were desperate, of course, they didn't want that red flag to actually be a red flag, because then the date would be a bust. And they're so desperate for the date to work that they ignore the red flags. So desperation is a very terrible thing. So, just got to be really careful about that. So, hi, Mary. I think I said hi, but I'm going to say hi again. So we also come now to this point where, in terms of looking at their intent, when we see their intent, and we see the real intent, it just opens up the doors, And again, too, it works in reverse, too. I've met really magical, fantastically beautiful, wonderful people that are still my friends, and I treasure them dearly. But when I first met them, the way they present themselves, they're overly humble and they're overly modest and they're self-deprecating. And so, they'll chat to you and they're kind of saying things like, I'm this and I, and they basically talk themselves down. And there's many reasons why people do that. But if I look at their intent, I say, man, what's the intent with this person? Their intent is to be good. Their intent is to be nice. Their intent is to learn. Their intent is to be grow, even though what they're saying on the outside may seem to contradict that. So it's kind of the reverse of the bullshitters. They have this profound, magical, beautiful, awesome intent inside that they don't know how to express or manifest. So it works on the opposite too, that we can see through kind of, people's defenses sometimes, or just, their inability to express themselves or to be fully who they are, because they think, to be good and to shine your light is to be egotistical. No, it isn't. So they, again, good people suffer from misbeliefs just as much as bullshitters do. So there's the flip side too. So we have to understand that as good people, we can fall into a similar trap, but for good reasons. It falls under that heading, which is such a profound conception. Inappropriate application of goodness. So when we read this book, we got to also see, sometimes we got to just go and take things in the complete opposite and see, hey, you know what, as good people, maybe this applies to me. Maybe I have hidden motives, and my hidden motives are just positive, and I don't know how to express them. So, it's quite fascinating in terms of that oppositeness. It's quite exciting also. All right. Okay, so never will they show or declare their real intentions and agendas. Always the BMN has to obfuscate, as their real agendas aren't legit, not kosher, and aren't defensible. They know this. They know they're perpetually bullshitting. They know their lives are a lie, and to prevent being caught out in this perpetual fraud, they have to disguise everything. It doesn't take much to see what they're up to. Once one is aware that people can pretend to do things for surface reasons, but have their personal agendas which are different, and in the case of the BMN, it's almost always about self-promotion, dominance, or money in some way, then we can fairly easily see through their charades. A most powerful technique for use with anyone is to simply ask earnestly and sincerely, what's the motive here? If we ask this and ask it with the intent to answer that question, we get incredible insight. So we have to ask it and actually make a point to answer it ourselves. Seeing and identifying motives Noticing and becoming more aware of the motives of others reveals them, clarifies them, and enables us to relate appropriately. As Jones the alien said, understand motivations, understand humans. So it's very powerful. So, okay, in the book we say motivations, but if we go to intent, it's kind of a different question to motivations. But yeah, motivations is a good start. But intent is a deeper thing. And just asking that question, what's the intent here? Oh, man, it's very powerful. It's very magical. And then the quote here is, there is BS for the sake of BS, for exaggeration and embellishment, essentially to enhance or glamorize some fact or truth. Then there is bullshit manipulation, whose aim is to hide, obfuscate, and change the facts to achieve their narcissistic goals. These involve manipulations detrimental to those preyed upon, usually making them inadvertently complicit to the very real, unethical selling out of their approval, energy, and agreement. So we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful. Cool, Max. Cool, Max. I again, if you wish to join on the Zoom and chat, because sometimes our learning, when we like, I'm very happy to just digress and get into detail of something if it particularly connects to somebody, or if it resonates, and to discuss it out in full. That's very powerful, but it's kind of interesting to just do it from just on my own today. All the other previous ones, we did a lot of that discussion, and I love where they lead. It's just fantastic. So yeah, I'm keen to hear specifically, what connected with you, Max. It's always very, very powerful to hear that feedback. Thank you. Very powerful. So we have to be careful how we define, view, or understand bullshit, which exists in great variety for many reasons. Typically, taking liberties with the truth isn't seen as a serious transgression. And it's this very perception that the BMN uses to obfuscate their nefarious doings, for they are nefarious, much more than we would like to believe. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we tolerate bullshitters, because we don't want to deal with the awful truth of it. The awful truth is, man, that you're just lying. You're being deliberately deceptive. There's no inadvertent bullshit. You are being deliberately deceptive, and they know it. They know they're stretching the truth. They know they're manipulating it. So there's no such thing as inadvertent bullshit, which means it's deliberate, which means it's just lying, it's deception, it's manipulation, it's deceit. An indication of the bullshit manipulator narcissist's internal obfuscation is, despite their obsession with image and status, they don't mind being seen as a bit of a bullshitter, or as they sell it, somewhat of a showman or a promoter, or as colorful, etc., or even under the guise of ambitious. Whatever label works that mollifies the harshness of bullshit and allows them some leeway and okayness when it comes to their liberties with accuracy. Not the truth, but strategic accuracy. If pressed, they will come up with justification along the lines of, well, I like to keep it interesting, and why be boring? I just spice things up a bit, and such like. But of course, these are all obfuscations. Deception with an agenda. Exactly. Almost always it's that. The agenda is sometimes, in the very, like you see it at school. You see kids, they didn't have a nefarious agenda necessarily. They just wanted to be a little bit special, so they embellish, okay, in the very starting phases of this. They stretch things just that little bit to make it a little bit more exciting and whatever. But what's the underlying agenda? It's not necessarily a completely negative agenda, but it's still agenda to satisfy the ego, to seem more important, to seem more special. So yes, it's always has an agenda of some sort. Exactly what that's a quote that I could actually put in the book here. I don't want to change this too much because this is my copy, but the book's already published, so I just do it for my own self. But that's why otherwise, if this was unpublished book, I would add your quote in there, Shisha. Deception always has an agenda of some sort. Yes. I mean, it's so simple, and it's so plain what you say, but so powerful. It's just like, duh, it always has an agenda of some sort. Bullshit obscured by more bullshit, a spiral vortex into ever more absurdity. And this is the problem. Something my brother once said to me, in a very peculiar thing that stuck with me because it was quite anomalous, and well, there were many implications to him saying it. But we were talking about people who get into like perverse stuff, and just perversity in general, and I guess the bullshit of perversity, although we didn't call it that. And he said, yeah, he said to me, I don't know why he wanted to warn me about this. Our discussion was about how like preposterous and ridiculous it is. Anyway, he said, be careful of perversity, because once you start on that, you always want more and more and more. And then I thought, man, you're telling this to me, but that sounds like you're trying to say that to yourself. So it was again philosophy of opposite. You see this with bullshitters a lot. They'll say things to others that actually apply to themselves. It's quite incredible. It's really amazing. So so I thought, wow, what kind of perverse stuff are you been getting into? Because at that time, I think he was just at the end of high school, or somewhere in that stage. So it's like, wow, that was quite revealing. But that's the point, though, that he was making exactly this. Bullshit obscured by more bullshit, a spiral vortex into ever more absurdity. Once they start, they have to keep upping the game. They keep upping the game. Max says, can we discuss about how to handle the narcissist? Okay. Yes. All right, Max. We can. Let me see. Selling untruth. I just want to go and see what the next, where we're going with the sections here. Okay, so these are all, they're just coming at the same point from different angles. I will go, and this point here, this pushing energy. I assume the laugh is from my brother and his perversity thing. Yes, it was very amusing to me. And I said, man, you're giving me advice, which is completely inappropriate. I mean, I was kind of at that stage, very innocent when it came to stuff like that. Not unaware, but I should say more inexperienced, really. And by somewhat design, of my own, but nonetheless, it was an inappropriate comment to make to me, utterly inappropriate. I said, man, you kind of like really revealing yourself here. So this pushing energy, this is one way in terms of dealing with the bullshitters, Max, how to handle them. So the wall of energy that bullshitters push is an obfuscating mechanism used to get away with bullshit, because we aren't looking at the overall pattern. And that's one way to handle them and to deal with them. And it's a theme throughout the book, and I think it's come earlier. The most profound way of dealing with bullshitters is to be able to spot them, see them, and be aware. Now, if you know a bullshitter in your life, do you also know somebody who's very aware and who has a completeness, who has independence of being, in other words, who's kind of got their shit together to a large extent, and they kind of see what's going on, they're aware, and they don't really they don't connect to the bullshitter. They don't really tolerate them. And the bullshitters avoid that person, typically. And when they come into contact with the bullshitter, they'll like kind of just look at them and say, yeah. And they don't even have to say anything, but it's in their awareness, in their flow, like, oh my God, you're just bullshitting now. And they might even say it sometimes. So they have that ability to just be and connect with the bullshitter in a very direct manner. So the one way, there's many ways to deal with them, but since we're on this point of obfuscation, this chapter of obfuscation, is to not be obfuscating how you feel, how you perceive, and your awareness when it comes to the bullshitter. That's the biggest problem when people deal with bullshitters. They don't want to deal with the awful truth, so they obfuscate it. Now, as honest, good people, here's the problem, though. When you encounter a bullshitter, you say, that doesn't sound quite right. And you don't want to say, yeah, but, because now you get into this big argument and you're not particularly good at arguments, and they are, and they just muddle things up, and then it all gets into this big mess, and you can't prove that they're bullshitting. But that together person who's got their shit together and who has that awareness and strength of character, they don't care about proving that you're bullshit. So I just know this is bullshit. It's like that judge who famously said in the case about pornography, asked for a definition. The judge says, well, I know it when I see it. And that was his definition of what pornography was, kind of, in a sense. So in the same thing, I don't have to prove that you're bullshitting. I know it when I see it. And that's all. So I don't have to say why I think it's bullshit. I just have to say, I believe it's bullshit. That's it. Now I'm making a statement of my personal opinion. So that's very important here. And this has come about in many other ways too, in people I've been connecting with. It's been a theme lately, how we share and how we communicate. If I say to the bullshitter, look, dude, I can't prove that you're bullshitting, and I've said in those words, but my opinion is that's just complete bullshit. Or I can say, hey, to me, and the key is the words to me, that sounds like bullshit. If I say, that is bullshit, now I get into where I need to prove it and say, well, how come, why, prove it? No. So I can just say, man, that sounds to me completely like bullshit. What are they going to say? Now the onus is on them. If they now want to say, no, it isn't, then I can say, oh, why? Now you try and explain and justify and rationalize all your bullshit. It gets flipped around. So, but the key point here is, it's to not be obfuscating yourself when you're dealing with the bullshit, which is like, I'm not so sure, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And, I don't want to cause a scene. I don't want to call them out. I don't have to do any of that. I can just have that awareness in my eye, like, dang, man, that just sounds like bullshit. And I can say it to you in a way if I want to, but say it in a non-aggressive, non-confrontational way. It's like, dude, man, that really sounds like class A bullshit to me. I can even give them a compliment. It's like, man, you're really good at like spinning the stuff and making it sound reasonable and sensible. What the fuck do you say to that? Yeah, I mean, how do you reply? I'm not being negative or aggressive. I'm just pointing out. I'm not making any judgment. I'm just saying, man, you're really good at bullshit. I'm pointing out an observation. But we can do this just with our awareness. And the key here is also to have that, like, especially if you know people who have their shit together and deal with bullshitters. Yeah, they don't tolerate it. It's like, man, this is just nonsense. Like, take your crap elsewhere sometimes. They have that. But in general, they don't have this confrontational thing with the bullshitters. They just say, it is what it is, and they deal with it for what it is, and that's it. And I think if you go back to when you were at school and you knew that kid who was doing that bullshitting, what did the other kids do? Johnny, he's just a bullshitter, right? Right, exactly. They don't deserve the benefit of the doubt because they aren't being genuine. Exactly. And when we have that, in other words, what I'm saying is one way to deal with them is to be real. Right? That's the point that I'm making here, Max. Be real. Be real with yourself. Don't you be in turn bullshitting because you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. You don't want to hurt their feelings. You don't want to cause a scene. All of this other shit. No, just call it for what it is. And if you're not sure, let's say you've got a friend who is a friend that you actually like, and they're coming up with something. Now, they might not be a bullshitter, but they might get caught up temporarily in bullshitting about something. You can say to your friend, hey, I love you dearly, but man, I got to say, that just sounds to me like the biggest load of bullshit under the sun. What's your friend going to say? If you say it with genuineness, and your intent is just to be real, it's like, I'm sorry, but that's what it sounds like to me. I know you aren't a bullshitter. I know you have good intent, and I know you're a good person, but I'm sorry, this just sounds like a biggest load of bullshit. Right. Yeah, exactly. Don't want to be a part of their bullshit. Yes. So when you share like that, in other words, be real, and don't you go obfuscating your reactions, your perceptions, your motivations with that. And really powerful when we just have that overall awareness and our own independence of being. In other words, that I'm willing to claim and state my opinion, my personal opinion, that I think what you are saying is bullshit. This is very different to saying it is bullshit. That's a very definitive statement. Now I'm forced to go and prove it. When I just say, hey, in my opinion, to me, it sounds like bullshit. And I'm quite happy to say that. And I'll say it confidently. As far as I'm concerned, dude, that's just profound bullshit. That's what it sounds like to me. And if they can ask why, well, it's what it sounds like. That's why. It's because it sounds like bullshit. So you don't have to get into a why. So it sounds like it. That's the why. So, you can kind of cut through it all and say, maybe it's just the way you're expressing it. Okay, say it in a better way. And then if they are bullshitting, they'll know that they don't have it. And then they'll go through all lame stuff. And you see what I mean? Yeah, there you go. You're just being with this lame stuff again. Just kind of call it, just be real. Now, again, we have to use discernment here. And a lot of times it's not worth getting into even that. You could just kind of share your things, kind of like you have it in your awareness and your expressions, and then not interact. That's the longer term. If you're forced to interact with these people on a regular basis, fine. Then you can go into more specific strategies of dealing with them. But in general, just avoid them. Max, are you in a situation um, where you have to deal with bullshitters on a regular basis? There's a bit of a delay between my Zoom and the comments, Max. So, all right. So I wanted to say this in terms of dealing with them, Max, to understand that they push energy. This is a very powerful thing. They'll literally almost have like this wall of energy that they push out. And that pushing of that wall of energy, that's Olivia's term, and I love it. It's a very powerful term. That wall of energy is something that it's like almost like a barrier, and they make it very difficult to penetrate through. So they have this barrier between them and you, which makes it difficult to connect and deal with their bullshit. So in the workplace, right. So that's very difficult in the workplace. It's especially if you are dealing with a superior, because you're in a situation where they have the power and you don't. So, it's somewhat, that's why they try to be in positions of power, because then they can get away with it and they can manipulate it. And I'm working as a hairstylist where most customers are narcissists. Yeah. I don't know, Max, in a situation like that, you kind of just have to, yes, it's, you're looking at a situation where the ideal solution is to not be in that circumstance. But since you have to deal with it as best you can. So, one way to deal with bullshit and in a situation like that is humor, So, I don't know. I've seen some hairstylists or just stylists in general, and they just make a joke out of things. Man, you're like really into your narcissism today. And they say it as a big joke. Actually, it's really true, but they say it as a joke. And then because they're all pumping and saying, well, yeah, and you make it so you can kind of say truth through humor and, just kind of point it out directly, but in a humorous way. And then it's like, well, okay, I'm a narcissist and, we're all narcissists, that kind of a logic. And so now you sort of make peace with it in a sense. And well, that's part of your job is to assist their narcissism. So, I don't know. You just maybe have to make peace with it a little bit. But again, humor would be a very powerful way of dealing it. Does that resonate, Max? Is that something that's, it might not be your style, the humor? It's a difficult situation. So this wall of energy, this whole chapter is about dealing with that wall of energy. And that's kind of a powerful thing. So, in the same way as they use a wall of energy, we can use our own wall of energy and we can make a space around us, which basically just say, hey, I'm in my bubble doing my own thing. I don't care what you are doing. And that's very powerful. That's very powerful. All right, cool. So you can use the humor. That's very powerful. I've seen some people, and well, I don't want to make an assumption, but they all just happen to be gay. So I don't know if this is, I not don't know, but I want to say specifically that I don't think it's just a gay thing, but it just happened to be, and they were hairdressers. They were gay hairdressers. Sorry, I don't mean to stereotype, but it's just a memory that I have, and it just happens to be so. I'm very, very clear that it's an exceptional thing. And they were very flamboyant, and so because of that flamboyance, also it enabled them to say whatever, and they would say the most outrageous, preposterous things to their customers. And the customers would just kind of love it. And really, they were just telling the customers what kind of assholes they were and say, man, what the hell did you come with this idiotic haircut for? Man, it's just ridiculous. It's like, you look like a total fool. And the person's like, yes, okay. But because they had such confidence and they had that flamboyance, it was accepted. So, okay, there was sometimes a bit of humor, but sometimes there was no humor. They were just like almost scolding their customers. So a lot of it too It's just about your independence of being and where you are coming from. So, I just use that example again. I really don't mean to stereotype. It's just I happen to remember it and it's stuck in my mind because it's so unusual, So it was really powerful that I marveled at what they were able to say to their customers. And the customers kept coming back. I mean, they were very successful. I love them for it. It's just astounding. So, they just the key to a dealing with bullshitters is independence of being, having some confidence and a self-assertiveness in a sense, without it being aggressive. Just, I'm doing my thing, I'm comfortable where I'm at, and hey, that's the deal. And that when you have that comfort of self, then it's a very profound difference. Because thank you, Michael. Hey, nice to see you. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Glad you're here, man. Glad you're here. So it's difficult to deal with them, particularly because sometimes we have to learn to be in a completely different way to what we are used to being. And that's the tricky part. So when we see dealing with narcissists and bullshitters, like you have to in your work, when we see them as this profound gift that leverages us to become somebody, to be more than what we've been before, to develop new ways of being, new styles of being, like, for instance, the humor, or like I was saying with that, it's kind of one guy I'm thinking of in particular, where he had this just outrageousness and he would just say whatever, but he said it with such confidence and, with such assertiveness that nobody could really argue with him. And, in a sense too, there was an implication that, yes, he's sort of saying the truth, but in a way, it wasn't something that needed to. He wasn't trying to put the customer down or whatever. He was just pointing out what actually was true, and it was really helpful. So there's many different ways that we can go about interacting that we don't think of initially. So it's really powerful in that. So one of the ways to deal, I'm answering this question, Max, how to deal with the bullshitters. One of the ways to deal with the bullshitters is for us to change. That's kind of a big point. It's pretty deep. It's a very big deal. It's not always using it. So, see, using vibe. So we'll take all of this and we'll turn it upside down. That hairdresser, that gay one that I'm thinking about, that's the vibe he used. He pushed powerful vibe, man. He was in charge. Well, he was kind of, even though he didn't own the salon, he was in charge of that salon in a sense. He was like the center, he was like the everything revolved around him. But he used vibe. He just pushed vibe. And his vibe was, I say whatever I want and you just shut up and listen. He cued his customers, in other words, as to how he wished to be. Now, yes, that might not fit with your personality. And yes, we can learn to do things like that, but how we are has to resonate with us internally. So flamboyance might not be a way for you to go. And, if we aren't gay, flamboyance is hard to pull off. It's a little difficult. It's one of the advantages of that. So, and I think one can be gay without being homosexual, by the way. And just my personal opinion in terms of that flamboyance. Now, all right, maybe I'll get myself in trouble for saying that, but, just my perception of things. But nonetheless, I'm making the point that some styles of being don't resonate with us, so we have to find our own. But we can own where we are and have our space and claim that. So we can have a very serious and sober way of going about it. But as long as we own it, we can claim it. And through that, we can cue. In other words, we can push out a vibe that lets people know where you are at. So you can, and when we do that powerfully and we fully own ourselves, then people basically are okay and they leave you in your space and okay, that's how they are, that's their thing. Let's say, for instance, that your vibe is being very earnest and very sober and very sincere. And people come to you and say, okay, well, that's their thing. And you go about, you're very detailed, you're very precise. Whatever your thing is, just own it fully. And that allows you to deal with lots of things. So, okay, you kind of a straight arrow and you call it as you see it, just own it. And your customers will accept it because they take their cueing from you. When you're in charge, in other words, that's the point I want to make. You as the hairdresser, this thing of the customer always being right, I'm sorry, I don't buy into that. We used to have a restaurant and rule number one for our waitresses was customer's always wrong. They would freak out when we said, what do you mean the customer? Well, if they knew what was going on, if they were restaurateurs, they wouldn't give you any crap and nonsense. In other words, the same thing. If your customer was a hairdresser, they wouldn't say and ask for half the ridiculous things that they did. So 99 times out of 100, or I don't know what the percentage is, but for the most part, pretty much, I'm sure that whatever the customers ask for or think or say, they don't really have a clue because they're not hairdressers, so they're mostly of the time wrong. Just be in charge. And that's why they are coming to you, because you are the expert. Right? So be in charge, not just because you are the expert in what you do, but because that is your job is to give them your expert. Good. I don't like to engage with energy vampires on their terms. Instead, I prefer just to be honest with my behavior in response. Exactly, Mary. Exactly what I'm saying. Be in charge. Be in charge of yourself. Now, in social situations, you don't always have the license to be in charge. But like in Max, when it comes to his customers, you do have that license to be in charge. You just have to change the relationship. You know, our best waitresses were typically mothers, you know, who had young children and who had, well, at that time, you know, typically, you know, the mother was in charge of the children. They weren't like this. They didn't appease the children and give them. So they had learned to be somewhat a little bit authoritative, which made them a good mother. And so they were good mothers, made them fantastic waitresses because they took charge of the table. They came and essentially they ended up basically telling people what to do, not in a negative way, but they just helped them to make decisions. They said, you know, people would ask, well, what do you recommend? And they would say this, that, and that. And they say very definitively and in charge. And say, well, why? Well, because those are the best things. Oh, okay. And then say, I'll have that. So they helped people to make decisions by being in charge. And the people didn't say, well, maybe what, and they didn't ask for nonsense stuff and all of this because, well, the waitress is in charge. And the people felt comfortable because that's the thing. When you have somebody who's not in charge of themselves and where they, you know, like in the hairdressing state, if you go to a hairdresser who's not in charge of being a hairdresser, you kind of lack a bit of confidence in them. He's like, well, you know, can I really trust this person, man? They're going to like change my whole look. But when you communicate and you push that vibe of being in charge, well, because obviously I assume you actually do know what you're doing. If you don't, well, okay, then don't be a bullshit hairdresser and go and learn more how to be a better hairdresser. So I'm assuming that's not the truth, but that could also be. So if you're in a position where you actually don't know what you're doing, then make a point to actually know what you're doing. Can a narcissist actually change? That's a very powerful question, Max. It's a fabulous question. I do believe they can. And yes, absolutely, they can. I can't say I've personally experienced. I don't know that I've known anybody who was a really deep narcissist who has profoundly changed. Now, I have a lot of friends who are earnest, good people, who are really awesome, fabulous people, and I love them dearly. And one of them, when they read my book, they said to me, this is all about me. Well, actually, many of them said that. But they really thought this book is about them. No, it's not about you. Some of the things apply to you in some measure, but absolutely it's not about you. So, being management, yes, Bina, absolutely. So, good people tend to think that they have all of these exaggerated narcissism. And yes, they can be a little bit egotistical, they can be a bit bullshitty, but they aren't really deep narcissists. So, I've seen those people profoundly change. But here's the problem when people get completely deep into narcissists and it's rampant. For them to change, they have to throw away absolutely everything in their life, not just one area or another area or a couple of areas, but absolutely everything, and admit and acknowledge that their entire life has been this one profound lie and nonsense and rubbish. And exactly what she says, they have to want to change. But let's assume that they really do want to, because some of them absolutely do want to change. But the problem is that they're then going to have to acknowledge that, oh my God, I was this profound bullshitter. Now, sometimes you get such profound life shifts with people who come out of jail, for instance, and they found God. Now, okay, sometimes that's a lot of bullshit, but sometimes it's for real. And, you know, the people acknowledge that in my previous life as a criminal, I was just horrible. I was terrible. I did all this stuff. And there's this radical transformation. Now, in some of those cases, the people may have been bullshitters and liars and narcissists, but I haven't personally experienced it. So I do think that radical, profound change is possible, but it would necessitate people saying that my entire previous life was a lie and nonsense. And also in the case of the narcissists and the bullshitters, because they don't actually really develop any real life skills of character, they now have to basically start from like, you know, as a baby, as a toddler, you know, kindergarten. They have to relearn absolutely everything. It's quite a monumental task. So they have to really, really, really deeply, deeply want to change. It is possible, but it's a big deal. Pathological liar maybe can refer to somebody who's deep into narcissism. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. A pathological liar is just another word for a chronic bullshitter. In this case, pathological is somebody who just lies by default, that they just automatically lie even if they don't have a reason for it. They're so caught up in their deception that and it's obfuscation. It's exactly what we're talking about. Pathological lying comes about because when they start to lie and the bullshit and this obfuscation, they realize they can't ever be real because they can be pinned down and be held to when they say something that's accurate. So they're always obfuscating so they can never be pinned down, which always obfuscating is always lying. Exactly. They become compulsive liars. Why? Because of this thing of obfuscation. Because they're always looking to obfuscate everything. So if they're always lying, they can never be pinned down. It's very sad. Exactly. One lie leads to another, and it compounds on itself. And it's that spiral that gets out of control. It's really powerful. So again, in terms of your question, it's a very cool question, Max. So I'm kind of sticking on that. So when we say using vibe, we want to use vibe with to deal with bullshitters, because we can push the vibe. Hey, I don't tolerate bullshit. I have no time for bullshit. I have no interest in bullshit. And I'm also not going to shy away from calling it if I absolutely have to. So, and I'm not going to pretend that I don't see your bullshit. That's the thing that is most bullshitters rely on the most, is that people they do pretend to not see the bullshit because they don't want the unpleasantness. No, we have to say, hey, I'm not going to pretend that this is bullshit. I'm going to see it. I might not say anything about it, but I'm going to see it. I'm not going to pretend it's not bullshit. So anybody looking at my face and my awareness is going to see, when I'm listening to you, that I think this is gross and absurd and preposterous and ridiculous bullshit. I don't even have to say it. I can just show it in my awareness. This is one of the most profound ways for dealing with bullshitters. So in other words, I put out this vibe that I'm not dealing with bullshit. So clarity and unclarity, exactly what I'm talking about. Lack of clarity is a clear sign of potential bullshit. And we're dealing with philosophy of opposite here. We're just flipping everything on its head to see how we can use it. And so we can be clear that we don't tolerate and deal with bullshit. Right. They want to also elicit reaction out of others. Exactly. So they push this thing of friendliness and they manipulate you into it. And look how nice I am, and give me approval and all this. And because, well, you're a nice person and you want to be helpful, or you don't want to cause a scene, you want to make a fuss, you kind of go along with it. And you give them those reactions because, you know, you don't want to but hey, we have to push that vibe to say, no, I'm not going to allow myself to just be complicit and just to go along with your stuff because I don't want to cause a fuss or make a scene. So I'm very clear, and I'm clear that I'm not going to deal with bullshit, and I don't want anything to do with bullshit. And now I don't have to push a vibe that I'm aggressive when it comes to that. Just no, hey, don't bring your bullshit into my world. It's not part of my world. I want nothing to do with it. Thank you very much. Take it elsewhere. So we need to be clear. We need to be pushed clearly exactly what we want to do and where we are at. In other words, again, with intent, be very clear as to what your intent is. Now, you can't necessarily, as a hairdresser and you've got narcissist customers, you can't necessarily have the intent to say, I want nothing to do with narcissism. Well, because that's your boss and it's your clients. However, Max, in your situation, you can have the intent to say, I am not going to let this bother me. And you are what you are, I am what I am. And that's all. You want to be a narcissist? Fine. That's your deal. That's your problem. That's fine. yes, part of my job is helping you to and facilitating your narcissism by making you look good. Okay, I accept that. That's the reality of my situation, and I'm making peace with that. If you cannot make peace with that, well, then find a different way to do your hairdressing in a different salon where maybe you are only dealing with, people like Mary and Shisha and so on, who are real, genuine people who are coming to you and they want it for the realness. So, again, there are different environments in which you can do it, but if you're forced to be in that environment, make the best that you can. Right, exactly. I hear you. So again, there are cultural situations where, like you say, different masks in society, and they use others to get what they want openly. Yes, cultural things are a problem. But even within those cultures, you will find the bubbles of real people who are like you, that they want to get out of that. So you just have to find your tribe, as they like to say nowadays. Yeah, they don't know the word specifically, but yes, it's rampant. So when you explain what it is, like, yes, they will connect to it. They do know it. So yeah, it is a culture problem. But within all cultures, Max, there are subcultures and there are exceptions. Like you, I'll bet you anything, because I do know specifically people from Malaysia that were not that way, that said the same stuff, similar ways, that expressed this, and that felt a sadness because of the culture, but they were stepping outside of it. And I grew up in a culture that was very much a monoculture, and a very religious culture, very conservative Christian culture. In South Africa, I grew up. So, even in that culture, even people who went to church every Sunday, I just had opportunity to hear them privately discuss things. As a little kid, they would just ignore you if you didn't say anything. If if you were seen and not heard, you ceased to exist. So I ended up hearing them express their private thoughts. And then you hear that, oh my goodness, privately, these people are quite different to what they appear in society. So I'll bet you anything, it's the same thing over there. So maybe when it comes to somebody, when you ask that question about their intent, and you see, hey, here's somebody who has the same intent as you, an intent to be real, an intent to be genuine, reach out and connect to them and say, so I don't know how, depend on the situation, but essentially the underlying thing is that, me, I know I have to live in this culture and adapt with it and deal with it, but I want more. And I want to connect to people who also don't really care for the bullshit of the culture, who want to be real and genuine. And you'll be surprised at how people will connect to you. And I'll bet you anything that when you start connecting to those customers, I'm assuming sometimes they do come in. I don't think that every single customer is connected to narcissism, just maybe most of them. But when you connect to that realness, even people who are a little bit into the narcissism and culture, give them an opportunity to be real and genuine and really good, and they will blossom and it will come out of them. Just cue it, just bring it out of them by you being that way and reaching out first. Start that dialogue. Very powerful, very, very powerful. So, then they will recommend their friends, and, you start to build a tribe and a community of customers who are coming to you because you're real, because you're genuine, and because you are exuding goodness, and you're not afraid to be real and genuine and good and nice. A lot of cultures where there's hierarchy and dominance and, pecking order and all of that shit, a lot of people are afraid to be nice because they believe niceness is a sign of weakness. It isn't. Right? You can be nice and be genuine and be sweet and be sincere and all of that stuff. And you can be potent and powerful at the same time. Thank you, man. I'm very pleased to hear that. I'm very pleased. It's difficult. Our conversation is a bit of a one-way conversation, so I'm not able to adapt and specifically customize what I'm saying to your particular situation. So, without that immediate feedback, it makes difficult what I'm saying. But, I'm glad to hear that that's helpful. That's very cool. All right. So I'm just kind of skipping a lot of the stuff here because we've explained it so much in depth. And we come to the next chapter here, entanglement and promise. And a little cartoon here. I've already said, yes, we will take these nests. I know the area, great location. Now we can be neighbors. You're going to thank me. Yeah. You just with the alligator down here. They get so caught up in trying to bully and push and be in charge that they don't really see what's going on around them. So bubble mindset. Bubble mindset, and we have to be careful of that, that to just go along with people because, well, they push this and they're looking to be leaders and they take on this leadership role, and you don't want to object to say, hey, but wait a minute, because now then that means you're going to have to do it. So often we just kind of pass it off onto them, and then we end up in a situation like this, where you end up in a worse situation because you've listened to the bullshit. So pressure, that's the thing. They push a pressure and they rely on people to not want to push the pressure back. But that doesn't mean that there's an assumption that when we push back at pressure that we're being confrontational. No. If I have a solid bubble of solidity around me of my own independence of being. In other words, I'm happy with who I am. I like who I am. I'm in charge of me. And when it comes to my stuff, I'm confident, I'm competent, and I claim and own what I'm doing. So like, for instance, in being a hairdresser, or like when I was in the restaurant, right, in the restaurant business, if I'd go to a table as a waiter or as the restaurant manager, I'm got total in charge. I'm in charge. This is my world, my vibe. You coming into me. It has nothing to do with who I am as a person. It has to do with the situation, right? So I'm in charge there. Now, it doesn't matter how much I don't have to have any wisdom or smarts. In that situation, I'm in charge. And the same thing with our waitresses. Some of them, they were just students or whatever. And, they might even have been somewhat timid in life outside, but they learned to be in charge as a waitress or a waiter. And it was very profoundly, transformational for them, that. But I'm just saying that it didn't necessarily initially coincide with their personalities, but it did have an effect on their personalities. But within a particular context, I can say I'm in charge. So in a social situation, for instance, same thing. I can say, hey, I'm in charge of me. That's it. Yes, I know I've got a lot to learn, and that's obvious for everyone, but me in particular, I know I have huge amounts to learn. But when it comes to me, I'm in charge of me. And that's my bubble around me. I'm in charge of me. So, hey, don't come and push pressure on me and do it. What you want to do with yourself, that's your business. And I don't have any problem with that. Whatever, that's your thing. That's you and your conscience. Right. But when you start to take your bullshit and you want to come and push it into my world, now you are intruding in my space. It's very much like physical space. We've got that little bubble around us where once people come inside that physical space, I have every right, and, it's acceptable in society to say, whoa, you're a little too close, just kind of, keep your distance, in other words. And okay, it's not very far, but psychologically, we need to do the exact same. We need to have that same bubble around us as we do it physically. Yes, okay, I know when you go on the subway, that bubble of space completely disappears, or other particular situations, but just in general, to use that same concept psychologically to make this bubble of I'm in charge, this is my world, my bubble. In this world, if you cross this immediate little barrier, you're now in my space and my rules apply. And in that little world of me, I'm completely the entire universe and everything goes according to me. So if you don't want to have any part of that, fine, don't come into me. And I'm happy to leave you be. Now, it's very important also when I'm in charge of my world to say you and your world, that's your thing. But if you're going to push it where it infringes on my world, in other words, like physically, when you come into my personal space too close, I have every right to push you away. Same thing with the bullshit. They know, they make that deliberate effort actually to invade your personal bubble. That's how they come to be manipulators and coercers, and how they get that agreement, and how they force you to be inadvertently complicit and all sorts of stuff. There you go. Mary says, I recently told someone to please back up because they got too close to my personal space. Yes. And to teach young ones to resist peer pressure. Yes, absolutely powerful. And the thing is, when you resist peer pressure, it is not allowing it into your space. That's quite a different thing to now me going and basically counter-bullying and pushing my ideas onto others. Hey, if you really want to be a bullshitter in your own little bubble, as long as you're not pushing it onto me, well, that's fine. Okay, you have every right to be a bullshitter now. Okay, maybe they're not a bullshitter, but let's say somebody, cracks jokes and they're making, stupid jokes that aren't funny. That's their thing. we have to be tolerant of people's freedom to be nincompoops. Right? That's it. That's just part of tolerance and living and accepting things. And eventually, if we really stretch ourselves and we grow somewhat, we can learn to celebrate difference. To say, well, that's not something, it's not a way that I would go, but hey, I celebrate the difference. And when we really start to see that and we develop that ability to celebrate difference, not just tolerate and accept it, but to celebrate it, then we get to see just incredible magic in so many things. And it's really profound and it's really magical. But in the meantime, though, to claim that, hey, in my world, I have every right to be in charge in my bubble. However, that doesn't mean that I can go and foist it on you. Likewise, it doesn't mean you can go and foist it and push it on me and impinge in me. So you respect my personal space, psychologically, emotionally, intellectually, in every possible way, and I, of course, respect yours. Right. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't, or that we aren't going to perceive others. We're still going to deal with that, and we have to learn to develop that tolerance to let others be. Right. Okay. Now, there is situations where if I see you impinging on somebody else's personal space, for instance, if they like physical violence, where now I can intervene. So sometimes we are called by circumstance, like literally if there's bullying and I can go intervene to stop the bullying, or somebody's, hurting somebody or causing them injury. That also applies psychologically, emotionally, intellectually. So yeah, exactly. The God-given right to be a nincompoop. Yes. But there's limits to how much you can be a nincompoop. When your nincompoopery starts to become completely negative and criminal and abusive, that's a whole different thing. You've got a right to be a nincompoop in your own bubble, but you don't have a right to take your poop and spread it all over others. Right? There's a difference. So we have to be discerning in of this, that there are boundaries, and we ask for respect of our boundaries. Likewise, we're going to respect others' boundaries. But when they cross those boundaries, and especially with others, sometimes we even have the right to interfere because it just becomes a matter of ethics. But we have to be careful in that, So we're not just jump in and protect people and say, oh, I'm this big protector and help. Sometimes people have to learn to deal with the shit on their own also. That's part of the learning process. So, discernment, it's why in the beginning of the book we said, one of the key things here, and the same in the group, 3 key power terms: awareness, discernment, and understanding. They are huge. Because why? They add to you. And they add to the universe as well. So awareness, discernment, and understanding, ADU, very powerful. And so it's the theme that runs through all of this and everything that we're doing. We've got to say it's not just blanket rules that always apply. We need awareness to see what's going on. We need discernment to see the layers of what's going on, the preciseness, and through the discernment, it leads to understanding. And when we get that understanding, now through that understanding, we are able to act and interact appropriately with sensibility. Very powerful, very powerful. All right, so pressure. So I'm kind of on the theme of doing everything opposite in terms of, yes, it applies to the bullshitter. When we kind of flip it around, we can make it work for us. So in the case with pressure, we can put out a pressure to say, hey, my bubble, or my psychological, emotional, intellectual, my bullshit tolerance bubble is very strong. That's it. I have a solidity about me. So in a sense, it's a pressure that I put out. The pressure on my bubble is very powerful. This is cool. In other words, don't come and mess with me with your nonsense bullshit. Take it elsewhere. So that's very powerful. And the same thing with condoning complicity. Hey, I don't want to be condoning complicity, and I'm not going to do that either. So if I see you in a situation where you are kind of, manipulating and forcing this, that I'm going to say, whoa, no, whoa, wait a second. I don't agree with that. Don't just take it like, because I don't object, that I'm not agreeing. So I can't condone it either. So sometimes we actually have to step out and push back, right? Because they do that a lot of times. They'll just, we condone complicity by not saying anything. So, and you see that in the Me Too movement, the people that worked around those abusers of power, the secretaries or their managers or whatever, that they condoned that complicity by not stepping up and saying, no, this is wrong. So they become part of it. We can't do that. We can't do that. Very powerful. Assumed ownership. I don't remember what this is exactly about. This is interesting. Well, let me read this other quote here from Terence. The truth does not require your participation in order to exist. Bullshit does. It's that thing of complicity, right? The truth does not require your participation in order to exist, but the bullshit does. So you have to actively participate in bullshit to keep it alive. If you don't participate, it just dies. It just dies. And then assumed ownership. For some mindsets, they take ownership not just of things, but people. Even when discarded, they still assume territorial rights over these people and their long past relationships. How preposterous. So this is just about in dealing with relationships and BMs. Afterwards, they still tend to always think of you being yours. They never let go. And you have to make that effort to make it clear that, no, I never belonged to you, and you never owned me, and you're never going to own me. And that's very powerful. So we have to kind of be aware of that and actively disengage to that and make it very clear that it was never the case, even though they may have thought so, and it's never going to be the case. Yeah, they crave that participation, Mary. They have to have it, because if there's no participation, bullshit just on its own, where's the value? It doesn't. And they know this. And yes, it may have started internally with them bullshitting themselves, but that internal bullshit was always with the purpose of spreading it to others. If you just always bullshitting yourself, well, that's really it. And you do get caught in that, then now you're dealing with something else. Now you're actually dealing with a kind of mental illness. I mean, that's the kind of classic madness, where you start to you start to believe the bullshit or the lies or the deception. And then that's a whole different category. So we have to be aware that, yes, to me, bullshitters are just fucking crazy. Excuse my language, but that's it. In the plain, ordinary sense of the word. They're irrational, they're illogical, they make no sense, they do things that just don't add up, they do things that are self-detrimental, all of that. Yet, they are not mentally ill. I've got a big post of this because somebody took great issue with me saying that they're crazy. Oh, you can't call it crazy, it stigmatizes craziness. I'm not doing anything of the sort. I'm not saying that mentally ill people are stigmatized, or no. I'm saying narcissists are just plain flat crazy. And when I shared that perception, almost everyone that I've ever known who has deeply suffered at the hands of a bullshit manipulator, narcissist, and an abuser, when they got to that point, and I said to them, but you know what? In the end of the day, these people are just flat fucking crazy. Oh my God, it was such a profoundly yes, now that you say that, it's something they didn't want to say themselves because of their goodness. And so because they didn't have this conception of craziness, they kept trying to find a reason and an excuse and a justification and a validation. Yes, but maybe. Yes, but. And none of it made any sense except when they connected and I said, but they're just crazy. Oh, now it all makes sense. Now everything, all the irrationality, all the illogicality, all the self, the self-annihilating and things that don't help themselves, all of those suddenly made sense. It makes sense in the context of them being crazy. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense, and we keep looking for it to make sense. And that's why people end up staying in those relationships, because they assume it has to make sense in some normal, rational way. But they don't realize that it makes sense in the context of them being crazy. When they see that, say, well, okay, that's it, I'm out of here. And almost inevitably, either they then, make the decision to leave, or, and most of the time, I've been talking to people afterwards, and now that understanding that these people are just flat crazy, it allowed them to make peace with the situation. And, I understand it now. Okay, they're just crazy. That's it. End of story. Not mentally ill, crazy. Very, very powerful. So I don't know if that helps, Max, in terms of dealing with, the people you work with, to say, okay, they might not be excessively so, like some of your customers, but maybe your boss. Okay, when you say he's just crazy, that's it. Okay, I'll deal with it, because now we know where it comes from and it makes sense. And when things make sense, we can easier deal with them, and we can handle it. Because when we really, really understand in that sense of where it makes sense, that's when we get personal peace of things. And that's the part too, in terms of the first chapter that we really went into the preposterousness. When we understand they come from this place of profound preposterousness, which is really craziness. Isn't craziness just preposterousness? Really, it's the same thing. Then we realize, okay, they're just in a functional way, they're like a functional crazy. Then they all make sense and say, hey man, sorry, you're just too crazy for me. I don't want anything to do with you. Or we know how to deal with it. We don't think that it should be reasonable, that they should be sensible, that they should be logical. No, they're just crazy. So we have an expectation of all of the stuff, the irrationality, the logical, the craziness, the absurdity, the preposterousness, the outrageousness, all of that. Okay, I can handle it because I know where it's coming from. Yeah, there's no sense to their behavior and it becomes out of control. Exactly. All right, so let's go here. Comparison and hierarchy. All right. You know what? It's not quite, but I think I'm going to just leave it here for today, because comparison and hierarchy, this is a very profound point that comes into a lot of things. And when we understand comparison and hierarchy, it's very liberating. And you asked about how to deal with them. This is a very useful understanding for how to deal with them. But I'm going to call it for today. Also, just looking at my own energy. Energy management, very important. And that's one way to deal with them, Max, is to pay attention to your energy. First of all, it's very important to understand it takes less energy to be negative than it does to be positive. So if your energy is low, it makes dealing with those people very, very, very difficult. So have high energy. And if you think of people that do successfully deal with bullshitters, is because they have high energy. When you have high energy, you make that shield of being in charge. Your power shield of independence of being becomes solid and firm. Low energy, and of course you got low shields, like on the Enterprise, or whatever, and on a starship. Oh, our shields are at 10%, annihilation imminent. Well, yeah, so the same thing for us. So we have to have high energy so that our shields are solid. Very, very, very important. So I don't know how that applies to you, Max, if you're still here or not. Oh, thank you, Shisha. Me too. Thank you, Mary. Max, if you're still here, think of your interactions in terms of energy. And Mary, with you and your friend, how her energy is an issue. If she also clicks, still here. So when you think of this, Max, in terms of you and energy, like on high energy days, is it less of a problem? I would bet anything that it is. When you go in and you're high energy and you have solidity, then it's not such a problem. Low energy days, it's a problem. So really pay attention to your energy. That's a very profound way to deal with them, a very simple way. Simply be have your energy at full, at max. That's why your name is Max. You need max power, max energy, Max. Maximum power to shields. Yeah. You see, when we're dealing with them, we don't have to have weapons necessarily like in a starship, but you just have to have powerful shields. Yeah. I'm just waiting a little bit for connectivity. All right, my pleasure, man. My pleasure. I'm glad you enjoyed. I'm glad, and I hope we see more of you. And I hope you post more in the group also. And maybe where your name is, if you can put Max in brackets there, so everybody knows it's Max, that we can read those characters. I don't know. They don't click to my eye, so I can't see them as MAX. I doubt if they actually mean MAX, but maybe. I don't know. Yes, exactly, because you have higher energy, Mary. Yes, exactly. It's very important, very important. But that's just life in general. It's not just in dealing with stuff. If we low energy, then we feel all the negativity of the world and the sadness of the world and stuff. So energy management is the key when it comes to just dealing with everything. All right, so we'll get into that a little bit next time. It's a nice segue to carry over next time. So brilliant. Thank you very much, guys, for being here. I really appreciated the comments. It really helps me a lot, Yes, I can do this on my own, but the interactivity, that's really special for me. Shisha says, is this why how people who are ill tend to be negative? Yes, absolutely. Even when being negative makes them sicker. Yes, Shisha, yes, absolutely. It becomes a spiral. Thank you, Max. Yes, for you too. It becomes the spiral. Yes. And depression, same thing. Depression leads to lower energy. The sadness, the negativity drains more of your energy. And it's this downward spiral. So yeah, we have to pay really, really scrupulous, absolutely be impeccable with our energy. And that really is the whole way of impeccability. It is energy management at its utmost, because being impeccable is using your energy in the best possible way. It's being scrupulous, being thorough, being diligent, being ethical, having a clear conscience. All of those things, energy management. So yeah, profound insight. Exactly why sick people tend to be negative, and getting sicker, a negative, it makes them even more sick. On that same point, Mary, Shisha, before we go, one of my favorite examples of power, positivity, and awesomeness is the positive nurse. Oh my God, they are just magical people. And you want to see what I'm talking about? About a bubble, a power bubble shields. Those positive nurses, man, they come into that room and the people are miserable and whiny and moany and complaining. And some of them will be outright rude, and they will just say to the nurse, like, oh my God, your hairstyle sucks today, you ugly. And they'll just be nasty and horrible. Just bounces right off of them, makes no difference. And they'll come with a cheerful smile. Yes, I see you all grumpy today and whatever. And they'll turn them over and they just completely take charge of them. And that's the point. The nurses, the really good nurses, are always in charge, not just of the patient, but of themselves and their emotions. Whatever comes at them, they have this power shield around them. Stuff just bounces right off. It's very important to deliberately create those shields. Now, I saw a post yesterday about actually visualizing that shield in colors. And different colors have different things, but specifically to visualize your shield as having kind of a bounce effect. So when stuff comes at you, if it's negative, it just kind of, absorbs a little bit, and then it bounces right back and goes right back to the person. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. All right. We can talk about it again next time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's most enjoyable. Thank you very much. This was very cool. I really had fun. Cool. Cool. All right. End meeting. End meeting. Yep. Stop live stream. Bye-bye. Brilliant, man. Brilliant. 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 Bye-bye, Mary. Ah. Oh, that's interesting, Bina. That's very interesting. No, I said, man, how did that happen? Because I ended the live on Facebook, but I didn't close the meeting, and I didn't realize I'd still left it open. So, even though I ended the live on Facebook, this is now separate to that. So I tell you what, Bina, because this will be part of the same recording. So I want to end this completely and start a new separate meeting.
Okay.
So I'll put that link for you in 1 second. So very interesting.
Okay.
I learned something. All right. See you in a second.